Before that, I came
Okay, go ahead.
Before that, I came from a K through 12 school district, so I have some experience in governmental accounting, and I'm really happy to be here. So
Well, welcome.
Thank you for having
And this is week 2 for Diane.
That's
She's
right.
Still here.
So she knows it all.
me.
Thank
Diane,
you.
Your last name is again?
Topple, Topple.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome all, and I'm going to turn over to Sarah for roll call.
Great, thank you, and hello, everyone. We have kind of a small group with us today, but we have a full audit committee here. Joan Sullivan, our chair, and she's in the Albany office, and in the New York City office, we have the other 3 audit committee members, Robert Rodriguez, Beryl Snyder, and Al Carney. And with them is our Deputy General Counsel in New York City, Ricardo Salomon. In the Albany office for senior staff members, we have Kim Ellis, Portia Lee, Jenna Flinton, Karen Ellinger, Diane Topple, who you just met, Amanda Nazario, and myself. On the line from our KPMG external consultants, we have Marie Zimmerman and Jeff Coach, and Matt Moore, who's our Deputy General Counsel in the Albany office, is also with us via Zoom. And with that, Madam Chair, I turn it back to you.
Thank you, Sarah. First order of business, we, I think everyone got the copy of the minutes from the June 21st meeting. Does anyone have any comments or concerns with it? With them? Do you have a chance to read them? If not, could I have a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll move.
Second.
Thank you, both of you. That's Beryl and Al. So the next order of business is for KPMG. Jeff, who's the audit manager, actually I should say managing director for this audit, and Marie, who is a new partner to go through the plan for this year's audit.
Congratulations. Before we start, congratulations to both of you.
Thank you. Can everybody see the screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So we're happy to be here again with you this year as we kick off the March 31, 2024 audit. Our presentation is kind of very similar to the past, but we'll go over some of the key highlights and important facts for the committee to know. And just kind of get you there. If there's any questions throughout the process, please don't hesitate to stop us and let us know as far as that goes. Starting here on slide 2, this is just kind of a summary slide and just kind of, the focal point for everybody is audit quality, right? And we all want to have a high quality audit, and that's kind of what drives us for the audits that we do perform for our clients, and specifically here for DASNY and the committee. And in delivering that quality audit, we focus on 4 key elements for exceptional client experience. That's the quality, the overall experience of both the audit committee, the board, as well as the management of DASNY, the productivity and the efficiencies of how the audit flows, and just the insights that we provide as we kind of go through our process. So we look at that all coming together as kind of our overall audit process and what we try to deliver each year when we meet with you. The next slide here, which doesn't want to flip for some reason. Hang on. It's not. Okay. Hopefully everyone's got a presentation. I don't know why it doesn't want to work.
If we have it loaded on, Amanda has it on her computer as well. Should we switch to Amanda's version?
Yeah, if we can, that might be work. For some reason, it's not flipping the slides on me right now.
Sure. All right, let's just pull it up.
While we're trying to get that pulled up, I believe the next slide is our team org. I know a lot of you have worked with me since 2012. I made partner in 2014 and serviced you for 5 years. And I am now joining your meeting today as a client liaison, as I have accepted a new position at KPMG as the Albany office managing partner. I am truly humbled and honored to take over that role. And as a part of that role, I am the client service partner for our Albany clients. And so I met with Joan and Jeff, and I am joining today in that new capacity of that role. But I've known many of you for the past 12 years, 10 years here. And I know that if there is any concerns about audit quality or anything of that manner, that you'll definitely reach out to myself or Jeff with any topics in that presentation. So I see that we now have our key themes for discussion up, and I'll turn it back over to Jeff.
Yep, thanks, Marie. And you can, Amanda, go to the next slide here, which again, alluding to what Marie alluded to, you'll see here's our audit engagement team for this year. For the majority of this, everyone is the same returning team members, which is significant for DASNY. It's better overall quality and as well as the efficiencies that we have from performing the audit. The only change, as Marie alluded to, was that our former client relation partner, office managing partner, Dan White, who just recently retired from the firm. So we wish him well, and Marie will have a lot of success in his roles and the person to go to if there's any concerns from a client relations standpoint for this team. At the bottom, there's a little section there. We do also involve MWBE assistance as part of our audit. We develop our audit plan and strategy through collaboration with our other MWBE firms, specifically Long Island Financial Management Services. And we do involve their team in all 4 aspects of the audit, whether it be the planning aspects, the control evaluations, substantive features, and completion. So all throughout the audit, they're involved in the decisions that we make and overall who's going to be performing those activities. We do work together as one cohesive team from the beginning through the end of the audit and provide some great experience from that standpoint.
Jeff, it's Al. Would you tell us what the percentage breakdown is with regard to the work that KPMG does and the work that your MWBE audit partners do?
Sure. Yeah, and it can vary from year to year. I think for the most part, we typically try to shoot for what the state does look for at a 30% level.
Okay.
And that's typically split between MBE, WBE. Last year was a little different. One of the firms that we had historically worked with was unavailable to provide resources. So we will continue to work with the firms that we do have, specifically Long Island, to try to ramp up and bring that percentage up again this year. But typically we aim for that 30% threshold.
Thanks, Jeff.
Sure. Let's move on to the next slide. As far as the engagement team, like I said, we have a full returning team, and we do have a joint interest in driving quality and eliminating the peaks in the workload. And that particularly happens when you get to the year-end work. DASNY has a very quick turnaround from the point in time when we start our year-end work through the issuance in June. So to eliminate that, what we try to do every year is we meet with management, identify key points of where we might be able to accelerate the work. So sometimes we'll find areas that we can actually test transactions that have already occurred. Think of a lot of the cash activity for your bond offerings and all that, and try to test those in January and February before your year end. We do listen to feedback from management about what procedures we might be able to move forward and continue to be proactively communicating and coordinating through all phases of the audit to make sure we meet milestones and deliver on those requirements. So moving on, if you want to move on to the next slide, we're going to go into some of the required communications. If we could flip to slide 7, this is the audit plan required communications. So we will perform our audit of DASNY's financial statements as of March 31, 2024. It will be performed in accordance with auditing standards generally required in the United States of America and the standards applicable to financial statements audits contained in government auditing standards issued by the Comptroller General of the United States. In performing that audit, we will perform some consideration over the internal controls over financial reporting as the basis for designing our procedures, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of those controls. As we do those procedures, if we do identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies under the requirements of government auditing standards, we do issue what's known as the Yellow Book report, which is provided to management as well as the audit committee about any matters we have identified as we go through the course of the audit. In addition to the financial statement audit, we do also perform the audit, which includes the examination of the compliance requirements of Part 201.3 of Title II of the official compilation of code, rules, and regulations of the state of New York. And we perform that audit in conjunction with the other procedures that we perform over your financial audit testing to ensure that DASNY complied with all the investment compliance requirements for the fiscal year. Lastly, later on throughout the summer, we do perform the audits of the 12 individual DASNY bond financial statements, which are in accordance with the special purpose financial framework over the cash receipts, disbursements, and statement of net assets. If we move on to the next slide, this slide talks about the various responsibilities and who's kind of responsible for what aspect of it. The first box talks about some of the management responsibilities. They are required to communicate any sort of government issues that may occur to the audit committee here. They're also responsible for the preparation of the financial statements, ensuring they're fairly presented, identifying, ensuring that the entity complied with the laws, regulations, and contracts. If there's any instances of non-compliance or suspected non-compliance, they're required to inform the auditors of those. Management's also responsible for the design, implementation, and maintenance of a program of internal controls to prevent, deter, and detect fraud. They're responsible for the adoption of any accounting pronouncements or policies such as GASB 91 in the prior years, as well as any new pronouncements that do come out in the future, and providing reasonable assurance about the possibility of misstatements that are material to the financial statements. As it relates to your auditor and KPMG specifically, the overall objective of the auditor is to communicate clearly with the audit committee the responsibilities of the auditor as it relates to your financial statements and the overall planned audit scope and timing of the audit. We provide those timely observations, so we meet now and we'll also meet later on in the year to provide you that update and maintain that updated two-way communication. As it relates to the audit, we are responsible for forming and expressing opinion about whether the financial statements have been prepared by management with the oversight of the audit committee in all material respects in accordance with the applicable financial reporting frameworks. So in this case, the GASB standards. We're responsible for establishing the overall strategy of the audit plan, including the nature, timing, and extensive procedures, and communicating any procedures that will perform over any other information that may come out subsequent to the issue of the financial statements and the results of those procedures, if anything. We slide on to the next slide. The next one just talks about the materiality in the context of the audit. So as we do perform our audit, we do perform it using a materiality threshold that's established based on the overall financial statements, considering all the information that's included into it. What's key to this is that it involves the judgment of the auditor about what may be considered material to the users of the financial statements that are basically considered common financial information or what may be used by other needs. So for example, with the DASNY financial statements, users may be more inclined to focus on what the asset values of DASNY are. So we'll kind of look at that as maybe a benchmark for determining what materiality is. But we'll also view that materiality in consideration of the other statements or the footnote disclosures, just to make sure that what's said as materiality isn't too great or too significant from one or more statements, but focusing primarily on one. It does involve a lot of auditor judgment, and it involves consideration of both qualitative and quantitative considerations. So not only do we consider the overall dollar values of the financial statements, but we look at other sorts of factors that may come into place if there were any sort of material misstatements in prior years or other material weaknesses or significant deficiencies. Those judgments about the size of those misstatements can, impact both the nature and the extent of the risk assessment procedures, the identifying and the assessment of the risk of material misstatement, and ultimately the determination of the nature, timing, and extent of our audit procedures. So it's not a one-size-fits-all element, but as we kind of do the audit of a set of financial statements, we consider a lot of input information into kind of determining what that materiality will be. And we apply that to these financial statements and focus in on those items that would be considered to material to the user of the financial statements, considering DASNY as a whole. If we slide on to the next slide, this is the overall timeline, which is fairly consistent with what we've delivered on in the past. As we approach the November, December, winter time here, we do perform a lot of our planning and risk assessment procedures. This involves meeting with management at DASNY just to gain an understanding of what's been going on at DASNY throughout the last fiscal year. It's obtaining an update of the understanding of DASNY and its environment. We make inquiries of management, those in charge with governments and others at DASNY about any sort of risk related to material misstatements. We do perform some coordination with internal audit, both on the scheduling activities that internal audit will perform as part of the audit, as well as anything they've kind of identified throughout the year performing their various procedures. We will identify controls that we will be relying on in testing and do some evaluation, design, and implementation of both the entity level controls, as well as those process level controls, and take a look at any IT applications that may have changed from the prior year that are in place. Then in the January to March timeframe, we perform what is considered our interim financial work. This is where we perform some ongoing risk assessment procedures. We'll perform some tests of operating effectiveness of your internal controls. We may perform some walkthroughs over some of the key process areas, as well as start some of our substantive procedures over certain areas that may relate to more of the income statement activities, as I mentioned before, that may have occurred already throughout the year, to kind of move that up versus kind of having that crunch in the year-end period. That year-end period is the April to June timeframe. This is when we complete the evaluation of the design and implementation of internal controls we're relying on, as well as any remaining tests of operating effectiveness. Then we perform the remaining substandard procedures as part of the audit. This is usually where we have a lot of other involvement of specialists that we'll talk about in a little bit. We review the overall financial statements prepared by management, including those disclosures. And ultimately, at the end of June here, we present to the audit committee the results of the audit that we performed. The last bucket here is just that July through September timeframe, and that's when we'll perform a lot of the procedures over the individual DASNY bond financial statements. Noted at the bottom, you'll see that the anticipated issuance date, this date is June 19, and that's when we do plan on issuing the overall financial statements this year. If we move on to the next slide. So as we do go through the audit, we do also consider what may be considered significant risks. For the most part, we don't identify a lot of significant risk at DASNY, just given the nature of operations. However, one risk that does exist at any organization is not unique to DASNY, is the risk of management override of controls. This is given that management's in a very unique position to perpetrate fraud because of its ability to manipulate the financial records and prepare financial statements that are fraudulent. As part of our audit procedures, we consider this risk and we perform some various procedures. Listed below are some of the things that we do consider, but are not all inclusive. This will include obtaining a listing of journal entries management posted throughout the year, understand the controls management has in place to ensure they mitigate this risk, and examining a sample of journal entries, throughout the year as well as subsequent to year end to evaluate that they have the appropriate support and documentation for the entries that are recorded in these financial statements. If we move to the next slide, this is where we involve the others. The first bucket is internal audit that we just talked about a second ago, and we do plan again to utilize internal audit as part of the engagement. They've historically provided about 160 hours of assistance. That'll be involved in various test procedures, some of which are listed here, which could be over the purchase and sales of investments, some of the monthly reconciliation processes, and some of the testing of cash disbursements and cash receipts related to those individual bond issuances. We do involve technology assurance professionals in our firm, which are used to help us understand getting an understanding of the IT systems, as well as testing of consideration of cybersecurity risks as it pertains to the basic financial statements. And lastly, we do involve an actuarial specialist who is involved in reviewing the post-employment and other employment benefits obligations, your OPEB liabilities at the end of the year to ensure its conformity with the requirements of GASB 75. On the next slide, we talk a little bit about those cybersecurity considerations. The box on the left kind of talks to management's responsibilities, which is the focus on the internal controls, access and security protocols, diligence around third parties, and all the requirements that would need them to be to ensure they have a sound environment. On the right really ties into how we consider cybersecurity as part of our audit, and it really evaluates the risk of material missing resulting from any sort of unauthorized access that may have occurred during the year. So we are more of looking at what may have happened during the year to kind of make sure from a risk standpoint that we're considering any sort of instance that may have happened or could have happened that could lead to an increased risk to your financial statements and adjusting our audit procedures. So as we go through the planning phase of our audit, we consider that as part of our overall approach.
So Jeff, it's Al again.
Yep.
You're not offering as a part of the audit forward-looking advice with regard to cybersecurity. It's commenting on what's happened in the past. It's not.
Correct. Yeah, we are looking at what's happened throughout the fiscal year, just as part of the overall audit opinion. If there is something we may identify that may be beneficial, we may have a management letter comment, but not typically. Cybersecurity threats obviously are always changing. As I said, we do look at saying, hey, what's the process for evaluating these risks as part of the approach? And if we do think there's a deficiency there, we may have a control deficiency, but that would be, pretty much the extent of what we may have.
Thank you.
Sure. So on the next slide is just a listing of the newly effective accounting pronouncements. This slide looks a little empty compared to probably what we've seen in the past. There is one pronouncement that is applicable to DASNY this year. That's GASB Statement number 94 as relates to public-private and public-public partnerships. As you see by the little box indicator there, it's anticipated based on our early discussions with management, this will have no impact on DASNY's financial statements this year. In the upcoming years, there are currently only 2 more pronouncements outstanding. That's GASB 100, which relates to accounting changes and errors, and then GASB 101, which is compensated absences. Those are based on preliminary discussions with management, most likely to have a low impact, but something that will be continued to be evaluated by management as they adopt those standards in the coming year. So for the most part, a quiet year, I will say, compared to what we've had the last couple of years with all the various changes here in DASNY's financial statements. The next slide is just kind of a similar slide we've seen in the past as it relates to independence and kind of the requirements. You know, we maintain a system of quality control to ensure our independence. There are certain relationships that are not permitted based on the independence rules. The bottom line related to this slide is that as of today, we're happy to report that KPMG has done our evaluation and we are, in fact, independent related to DASNY as we go into the audit season here. The next slide is, again, more for your information. This is related to our U.S. quality, transparency, and impact reports. On this deck, those should be live links. If they don't work, please let me know. KPMG does put out these reports to be as transparent as we can about the various aspects of our business and some of the audit quality results that we do have. So please have a look. And if you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to myself or even Marie with those matters as well, too. And then the last slide is, again, just a listing of inquiries. This is, for management's knowledge, the inquiries that we would typically perform as we meet with management throughout the year. These are just a standard set of basic inquiries that we perform. Some may vary sometimes depending on the individual we're talking to or some of the responses we get. But we just wanted to share with you just kind of what those inquiries would look like. If, as the audit committee reads this, there's any concerns that they wanted to talk about related to this, we're happy to talk about that, or feel free, again, to reach out to myself as we continue to plan through the audit. That concludes what we've prepared. There's a couple of appendices. I think in the past you've seen us kind of talk about the key area of focus. That's one of the appendices that has those procedures we do plan to perform. But again, those are very consistent with what you've seen in the past and nothing worth highlighting here today. And the second appendices is just some more information about our audit transformation. KPMG over the years has gone through a lot of transformation, and I think if you read in the news, there's a lot going on related to data and analytics, and even AI in the audit, and just kind of some of the steps that KPMG has gone through and the investments we've made to kind of continue to make sure our audits are top notch and integrating a lot of those technology tools through the processes that we perform. So with that, as that concludes our audit, I will ask if there are any more questions.
It's Al again, I'm sorry. I'm curious, and I want to try to understand carefully, at what point the external auditors involve the work of the internal audit staff? That is, how much of the work is done before you then give Jenna a call to say, we've got some things we want to talk to you about before the audit starts or after the audit has started? How does that work?
It's I'd say an annual, year by year kind of process, I want to say. So, we typically try to start in the beginning of our planning phase, meeting with internal audit, whether it's myself or the manager team or the senior, trying to just have those preliminary discussions about what Jenna has seen going on through the organization, what her audit results have led to, and if there's any increased risk that we need to consider as part of our audit. Now, as we talked through before, the audit scope that we may have might be at a higher level, just given DASNY's financials as a whole, as opposed to what Jenna may be looking at. But it's still worthwhile considering some of the results that she's seen to make sure that we are focusing in on the right areas if there's more risk or concern. As we go through the process, we do try to meet. We meet with management as a whole. We have bi-weekly meetings that Jenna and her team are part of. But if anything were to rise to our attention that we thought needed more internal involvement, we would basically reach out and have those conversations throughout the process. That's the part that could change year on year, depending on what we're seeing. If it's a clean audit year and there's not a heck of a lot, we may not have as much of a conversation around that.
Okay. Thanks, Jim.
Yep.
Are there any other questions for Jeff or Marie? I think we're looking forward to another clean audit next year. And welcome back. We thank you for your time and we look forward to working with you guys. Thank you very much.
All right, take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Vote.
We're going to move on to presentation by Jenna now to talk about her internal audit report.
That's great. Thank you, Joan.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon, everybody. So I'm going to start off with some required communications first. The Internal Audit Department Charter and the standards for the professional practice of internal auditing require that certain communications be made to the Audit Committee on an annual basis. Those include confirmation of the Internal Audit Department's independence and objectivity, conformance with the Institute of Internal Auditors Code of Ethics and Standards, and the purpose, authority, and responsibility of the department. Annually, the internal audit team members complete an independence and objectivity statement and affirm to the best of their knowledge whether they are aware of any potential threats that might impair independence and objectivity, and acknowledge that they are required to report any future impairment if and when it occurs. I'd like to note that there have been no impairments to date. The Internal Audit Department's purpose, authority, and responsibility is reflected in the Internal Audit Department Charter, which was last updated in May of 2020. Briefly, the purpose of the department is to provide independent and objective assurance and consulting services, to add value and improve DASNY's operations, and to comply with Public Authority Law Title 8, Section 9, which says the internal audit function shall evaluate the authority's internal controls and operations, identify internal control weaknesses that have not been corrected, and make recommendations to correct those weaknesses. Are there any questions before I move on?
So I just have a question, Jenna. So when you identify weaknesses, I assume it goes to management, also to Karen. And Karen, is that when you kick in and work on developing stronger controls? And then do you work with Jenna to get
Yes.
sign off on those controls?
Well, Jenna doesn't sign off because that would be part
Right.
of operations.
Right.
I would work with management
Okay.
and assist them if there's a breakdown in the control, or if the control just occasionally doesn't work in one or two instances. It depends what the situation is, but typically I would work with management,
Okay.
not Jenna, because we want to keep Jenna out of.
Sure, that makes
operations.
sense. Yeah. Yeah. So some of the audit findings may involve weaknesses in controls.
Mhm.
Is that your responsibility to resolve those, or management? I'm just wondering how this works. You then kick into working with
I
management?
work with management.
Gotcha.
The internal control program is the responsibility of management. I assist management in implementing a program of internal controls.
And you report to whom?
I currently report to Sarah.
Sarah. Okay. Thank you. Sorry.
You're welcome. No, it's fine.
Now let's turn to the internal audit report, starting with the key highlights on page 2. The key highlights reflect a summary of our activity and key engagements completed over the past 6 months, as well as the audit staff profile. Moving to the next page, I'd like to cover some team highlights. I'd first like to commend my staff and thank them for the results of a survey during the year as part of our annual Quality Assurance Improvement Program, or QAIP. The results of the survey indicate that a majority of our audit customers view internal audit staff positively for their professionalism, knowledge, demeanor, and willingness to listen, and that the department plays a critical role in assuring core processes and procedures are functioning as designed. I'd also like to recognize Nick Pallas and Mamadou Berry for recently completing the IT General Control Certificate Program. This certificate program focuses on IT-related audit activities, such as governance, risk, project delivery, and IT general controls. As a team, we continue to work on IT education through various methods, such as self-training, webinars, professional practice guidance, and working with our subject matter experts, such as our IT consultants. Now let's take a look at the progress of our audit plan, which is on page 4. Overall, there are 12 engagements completed, 5 of which are in process and 5 not yet started. We have 2 IT engagements on the plan and 1 advisory engagement. As part of our required quality assurance improvement program, we completed a review of the internal audit process. We did not have any significant concerns as a result of that review. That concludes this portion of my presentation. At this time, I'd like to request to go into executive session.
Anyone have any questions so far for Sarah? Excuse me, for Jenny? Okay, so may I have a motion to go into executive session to discuss the financial and credit history of a particular corporation's proposed, pending, or current litigation, and the employment histories of particular persons with matters leading to the appointment, employment, promotion, demotion, discipline, suspension, dismissal, or removal of particular persons. May I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
Thank you. We'll now go into executive session. Right, I'd like to know, we've just concluded an executive session and that no action was taken in executive session other than that to return to the public session. Thank you. The next item is to review the audit committee charter. I believe the recommendation is not to make any changes to that charter.
That's correct.
And as well as the internal audit, that's a committee charter and the internal audit department charter. Does anyone have any questions on that, or do folks agree? Are they concerned? Have you all looked at them?
Concerned.
Yes.
Okay. All right, then there's no changes. We'll recommend that they stay as is. Thank you. I think that concludes our meeting. If there's nothing else, I'd like a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Who was Robert and Al? Thank you. And we'll see folks tomorrow. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much.